Today what I'm going to do is show you how to organize Olympus Workspace in a way that'll help you work with the images individually a little easier and organize your images and organize the actual workspace within Olympus Workspace so that you have a better workflow. Now, as you can see, I have my Olympus Workspace open, but this is almost completely customizable. And I'm going to focus on a single monitor setup versus a dual monitor setup. So that you can kind of, because most of us just use one monitor, either on our laptop or computer. So that being said, let's look at what's here now, and I'll walk you through how you can make changes, and then I'll talk a little bit about the some of the details within each panel. So right now I have 4 panels set up here, 1, 2, and then 3, 4. So I have the directory tree here. I have a filter panel here. And then I have the properties panel here, and then I have the editing panel here. And then in the middle, I just have the thumbnails from a little walk I did yesterday when I was out walking the dog. And this center image you can control with this. So if I want to look at the images individually but keep a film strip at the bottom, I can do that. So I can quickly go through. Or I can move the thumbnails over to the left. Or I can pop out the image separate like so from the thumbnails and work with this just like this. And this is good if you have 2 monitors. You can drag this window into your second monitor and work with the image directly so you have a nice large view. But if you're using a single monitor, I don't normally recommend doing it this way. And this is just the full screen, and you just hit escape to kind of get back out of that. So let's put this back into the thumbnail view with the film strip at the bottom, because this is normally how I like to work. And then what you can do within here is also control the zoom. So I can go in 1:1, or I can go to 300%, or select some other percentage here. If I really need to get in tight, I can do that. But 300% is about right. It's a good starting point. 1:1, and then back to the full image. Or you can just kind of creep in this way manually with these magnifying glasses. And then over here, you can compare 2 images side by side, or you can compare your before and after pics. So for example, if I want to compare this image, and I click this icon, what you see now is the original image as it states right here in the corner, and then the edited image is over here. But I haven't done any edits to this image yet. So let's go back and let's just do a quick edit. Like for example, I want to bring some of the highlights back in this sky. So what I might do is go to highlights and shadows and drag this down just a little bit. And then maybe increase the contrast. Not quite that much, just a tiny bit. And then dehaze it slightly. All right. And then maybe let's try a vivid filter, because the color looks a little washed out to me. And there, just a tad different, but let's compare now. So now we can compare before and after. And it may be hard to see on the video, but this image is definitely a little bit softer than this image. And this is more useful for more dramatic changes or long-term changes that you make, and you want to see the comparison. This next icon here is for really comparing 2 different images. So I can compare the image I just selected, then I go down to the film strip. But let's say I don't want to compare this image. I would pick, say, this image, and I can say, make this number 1. And then I'll compare it to, say, this image. And we'll make this number 2. So I click on number 2 here. So now I'm comparing this image with this image. And then if this is the image I want to use, I can click a star like I did in this case, or assign it a color, what have you. And I'll come back to assigning stars and colors when we get to the panels. So that's how you compare two different images. And there's multiple selections. If I want to actually compare three images, I can go over and then compare this image and make this number 3. So this is really handy when you're working a scene and you want to kind of compare different compositions. This is a very easy way to compare them once you're back into Workspace. So let's go back to a single image like so. All right, and the image it's going to select is the one that you have selected in the film strip. All right, now let's get to the panels on the side here. These panels here are not fixed. You can adjust them except for the directory tree. This is by default is always going to be on. And you can minimize these panels or expand these panels. And the way you do that is you move the mouse right over to a line in between, and then you'll see your mouse change like that to sort of a parallel line with a couple of arrows. And then I can drag this up, or if I need to see more of the directory tree, I can drag this down. And that's a pretty comfortable length here, because the filter, if I drag this up, there's really no point to have it this high because there's nothing down here below. Or for the filter, I can use one of these icons up here to toggle things on and off. So I can toggle the filter on and off like so. I can toggle the information, which is, this is the information panel, like so that I can just work with editing. Because a lot of times once I see the information about the camera or the picture, I don't need to see it twice. Right after I just want to start editing, I can turn this off like this. And then I can also turn off the editing panel, or they call them palettes. Especially if I just want to get a little larger view of the image itself, I would rearrange my film strip like so. So I can get a better view, or I can pop it out. But let's go back to the thumbnail view. Let's turn back on our editing panel. Now there's other panels here that are not in these icons. One last icon here is the history panel. And if we go to that image like this one, I can look at the history. And it's only going to save the history from what you did in Workspace when it was open. Once you close Workspace, it erases the history apparently. So let's edit a different image. Let's just say I want to crush the shadows a little more on this image. You can see that it just added that to the history window, and then I can crank up the contrast. And let me look at this a little bit more. And I can increase the saturation like so. So the history window is, handy for keeping track of your edits and things like that. As I was saying, you can adjust what panels actually show, not just by what's up here, but also using this window panel or from the menu. So I can go in and show collection, and you can see the collections window pops up. And of course, if I have a lot of collections, I can drag this down a little bit so I can see them all. And there's other ones here, show properties. Show navigator is one that's not one of the icons. So now the navigator has popped up. And this allows me to say, for example, if I'm zoomed into an image, let me pick a different image here, like this one. If I'm zoomed in 1:1, for example, the navigator window, I can move this over to the area that I want to focus on and edit, like so, just by using my mouse to drag around. Or if I drag this, the little red box window will follow wherever I drag to. But this is probably the best way to use it, is just go to some area you want to edit, like so. And the navigator window is too big, so I can drag this up, make it a little smaller, like so. And that's a pretty comfortable size. And if I don't really need the navigator window, of course, I can always go in here and turn it off, because there's a little check mark next to it, and there's a shortcut key if you prefer, like so. The other thing you can do is, for example, let me turn the navigator window back, or let's turn on the information window. The other thing I can do is I can put this information window at the bottom and put the edit panel at the top. So what I do is I just kind of grab the properties panel right here along, I would call this the menu bar, with my mouse, right click and or left click and hold, and then I can drag it down. And you should see a little transparent box here with up and down arrows and a right arrow. So what I can say is I want to move this down. So I click this and move my mouse right over that arrow and let go. And now the information or properties panel is below the editing panel. Or I can move it over to the right if I need to see a full view. And this is handy, especially if you're working with, say, EXIF data and there's a lot to look at. And then that gives you full view of both the editing panel, because this can get quite large as well, right? But, you know, generally I like to have this just below. And that sort of summarizes organizing the workspace in a way that works for your workflow, and hopefully that'll help you get through the images faster. So let's talk about this filter window here. Now this is not the like the art filters. This is for selecting your images from the thumbnails. So let's go to the thumbnail view, and let's say, for example, like if you look at this first row, I have 5 images of this house, because what I was doing was I was art bracketing, so I could, you know, kind of compare the different art filters against just a normal raw file. And it's hard off the bat sometimes to tell which one is the raw file. So what I can do is just say, show me the raws only, by clicking this format. And now I only have the raw file. So you'll see I'm down to just the one picture of the house instead of all 5 where it was raw plus JPEG. Or I can pick the JPEGs only, for example. Or I can just say, show me all the photos, or show me just only the movies. And I didn't do any video that day, but so this is pretty handy. And then you can reset everything like so. Now, once I pick the raw files, for example, because this is normally how I like to work in Workspace, is I then start picking the images I want to work with. And I do that by just using the stars. So let's say, for example, I want to work with this image and this image, which I've already done, and this image, and of course my girl dog, and maybe this last one, like so. So I've now sort of picked the images that I want to work with, and that way I won't have to scroll through everything to find them again. I can just click the star rating here like so. And now only the images that I picked will show. And, you know, think of your own workflow and how your brain works and what might work best for you. Maybe you don't want to use the star system. Maybe a color system is better, or some combination thereof to select particular images. Because sometimes what I like to do is, let's go back to the raw only. Let's uncheck this and let's look at all the raw files again. What I like to do is do Control A. So I'll select one, do Control A, because I know these are all of the raw files based on the filter, and then I'll color these a color, we'll just say pink, for example. And the reason I do this is sometimes I like to compare the raw file edit that I did to maybe a JPEG art filter, because maybe I didn't quite like the art filter. I wanted to tweak it a little bit, and I want to compare them. So what I can do is now go back to just, let me see all the photos, and now I can quickly tell among these 5 photos which one is the raw photo. So this is very, very handy. As I scroll down, I can see, bang, this is raw, this is raw. I compare this raw file against this JPEG image, or this raw file against this art filter, just to see the difference. And there's a lot of ways you can expand on that, but that's kind of the gist of it. The other thing you may have noticed is as I'm rolling my mouse over the top of the images, a little pop-up window pops up showing you the basically the exposure information and some other small settings that you did in camera. So that basically sums up how to organize your workspace in Olympus Workspace so that it works better for you. I'm just going to give you a couple of more quick tips. One is how I organize my photos in my directory tree. And I do that like this. When I import them this way into this structure. And it's primarily chronological, but I have my pictures folder. I have a Lightroom main folder because I used Lightroom for years before getting into Olympus, so I've kept this file structure for consistency. But primarily I do it by year, and then I break the year up into 4 quarters. So you can see fourth quarter has these 5 days in it. But if I look at the third quarter, I can see all of these folders. And sometimes I create a subfolder within the date chronologically so that I know that, for example, I have OM2N. So these were my film images on that day versus my normal digital images. But for the most part, it's just a chronological order, but this just breaks it down because if I have a 2019 or I just have individual folders by date, that tree structure will be so long, you'll be scrolling forever trying to find one day. So if I'm searching for a photo and I have an idea of when I took the picture, this helps narrow it down so that I can find it faster. One last thing that I didn't show you was just you can adjust the size of the thumbnails down here so that they're just easier to see. And zooming out is very helpful, especially if you're doing time-lapse or bracketed shots. You can quickly tell where one starts and one ends, especially when I've already color keyed all of the raw files separately from the JPEGs. So if you have any questions about Olympus Workspace, just leave them in the comments below. I'll be glad to answer them, and I'm going to be doing up some follow-up videos and go into more detail about some of the editing features here over on the right.